My name is Hannah Carter, and this is the story of how the people I thought would always stand beside me, the ones who should have been my greatest supporters, told me to take a bus to my own graduation. It was 1 week before the most important day of my life. I had worked for years at Harvard Business School, juggling endless assignments, sleepless nights, and the crushing weight of knowing I had to build a future without help from my family. I called my parents to finalize the details, a simple call I thought would bring reassurance, maybe even pride. But my father's voice was sharp, dismissive. "We cannot drive you to the ceremony," he said. There was no hesitation, no apology, just cold practicality. "You'll take the bus. We're buying Cassandra a Bentley." The line went quiet. My breath caught in my throat. I was 22 years old, about to graduate from Harvard at the very top of my class, and they were telling me I would arrive at the ceremony alone by public bus because my younger sister was being rewarded with a luxury car. A Bentley. The words echoed in my head louder than my father's steady tone. Cassandra was 18, only graduating high school, and yet her celebration was marked with extravagance, while mine was brushed aside as if it were an errand on their calendar. My mother's voice chimed in, then smooth, and practiced the kind of tone she reserved for moments when she wanted to wrap cruelty in silk. "Harper, you've always been self-sufficient," she said. "We never have to worry about you." That was their reasoning. That was their excuse. I could not even answer at first. I stared at the phone in disbelief, every memory of years of favoritism flashing through my mind, like shards of broken glass. I remembered birthday parties where I got books, while Cassandra got ponies. Vacations chosen for her interests, not mine. Achievements met with nods, while her smallest efforts were showered with applause. But this moment cut deeper than all the rest. I tried to steady my voice. "It's my Harvard graduation. It's kind of a big deal." My father did not flinch. "We're proud of you," he said, his tone softening just slightly. "But you'll handle this on your own, too. Cassandra deserves this gift." That was it. The conversation ended. My parents had spoken, their priorities made clear. When I hung up, I stood frozen in my tiny apartment, the silence pressing against me like a weight. My heart pounded, but underneath the pain was a fire I had not felt in years. Maybe I had known all along that this was how it would be. Maybe every slight, every dismissal had been leading to this single crystallized truth: I was on my own. And yet, there was something else burning inside me. It was not just anger, it was resolve. I thought of the long nights working 3 jobs just to afford textbooks. I thought of how many times I had told myself I would not break, not even when exhaustion felt like drowning. And I realized this was the moment. This was the story that was about to unfold. Because what my parents did not know, what they could not even imagine, was that their dismissal would become the backdrop to a revelation so powerful it would shake the ground beneath them. So yes, I would take the bus. I would ride that bus to Harvard Yard, step off and walk across the stage without their help. But when the world learned the truth about what I had built, when the announcement came, that would change everything. They would be the ones left speechless. And that's where my story begins. If you've ever felt overlooked by the very people who should have lifted you up, stay with me. Because what happened next will show you just how far someone can rise when they refuse to let neglect define them. Growing up in our sprawling Connecticut home, everything looked perfect from the outside. Marble floors, long driveways lined with manicured trees, family portraits displayed in heavy gold frames. People thought we were the model of success, a family touched by privilege. But beneath that polished surface, there was a divide so deep, it shaped every part of my childhood. From the moment my younger sister Cassandra was born, the spotlight shifted. I went from being the only child, the center of attention, to the reliable older sibling, expected to set an example, never to demand attention for myself. At first, I told myself it was natural. She was the baby. Of course, she needed more care. But as the years passed, the favoritism became impossible to ignore. On my 8th birthday, I unwrapped a set of educational books, practical, serious, the kind of gift my parents believed would prepare me for the future. 2 months later, Cassandra turned 4. In our backyard, a pony stood waiting for her, complete with ribbons in its mane, and a photographer snapping endless photos. The contrast burned into my mind. Vacations became another reminder. At 12, I begged to attend a science camp that could have changed my path. My mother patted my head and said, "Maybe next year, Harper," but next year never came. Instead, we went to Disney World because Cassandra wanted to see the Princess Castle. Every trip, every choice bent toward her desires. School only widened the gap. I worked relentlessly for straight A's, joined debate, wrote for the school paper, pushed myself until midnight every night. When I brought home my perfect report cards, my parents nodded. "That's what we expect from you." But Cassandra. She came home with B's and C's, and they applauded as if she had conquered Everest. "She's trying her best," they said. That message seeped into me. If I wanted recognition, I had to work twice as hard for half the reward. Cassandra, meanwhile, learned that she didn't need to work for anything at all. At 16, she crashed her first car, a brand new Audi. The very next day, my father handed her the keys to another. When I timidly asked for help buying a used Honda before college, he barely looked up from his paper. "Save from your job," he said. That was the rhythm of our family. Cassandra was the golden child, cherished and celebrated. I was the dependable one, the child who never caused problems, the one who could be safely ignored. My parents built their lives around that narrative, and over time I realized I was not just overlooked. I was erased. I never blamed Cassandra. How could I? She was as much a product of their choices as I was, but she learned to expect adoration, and I learned to survive without it. That gap created distance between us. She got the attention, I got the silence, and that silence hurt. It whispered to me at night when I was alone in my room. It echoed during holidays when my achievements were brushed aside. It became the air I breathed, but deep down a different truth was forming. If I could not rely on them to see me, I would learn to see myself. And maybe you know that feeling too, being the one overlooked, the one expected to carry the weight without applause. If you've ever lived in the shadow of someone else's spotlight, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Share your story, because this space is for people like us, people who know what it feels like to be invisible. And if you want to keep walking this journey with me, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. This story isn't just about being forgotten. It's about what happens when the forgotten child decides not only to survive, but to rise. Because the truth, every dismissal, every shrug, every time they told me you'll be fine, they were shaping someone they would never see coming. There is one night that still haunts me more than any other. The night I became valedictorian. I had dreamed of that moment since middle school. Years of late nights essays rewritten until the ink-blurred competitions entered and lost and entered again. When I was finally named top of my class, I thought this time will be different. This time they will see me. This time, my parents will sit in the front row, smiling, clapping, maybe even proud. The ceremony was set for a Tuesday in May. I reminded them weeks in advance. My mother smiled politely before her expression faltered. "Oh, Harper, that's the same night as Cassandra's piano recital. She's been practicing for months. You understand, don't you?" I nodded automatically, as if my agreement could hide the shattering inside me. On the night of the ceremony, I stood at the podium in front of hundreds of families, classmates, and teachers. My speech was about perseverance, about pushing through obstacles, about chasing a future bigger than the past. As I scanned the crowd, I searched for familiar faces. But the two faces I needed most were not there. Instead, they were seated in a different auditorium, clapping for Cassandra as she stumbled through her piano piece. That was the night I stopped waiting for them. It was like something inside me hardened, turning disappointment into steel. If they could miss the single greatest milestone of my young life, then I had my answer. I was on my own, and I would build my future without them. Still, the pain carved deep. I remember going home holding the medal in my hand, staring at it as if it might answer the questions I could never ask out loud. Why wasn't I enough? Why could they not look at me with the same pride they poured so easily on Cassandra? But those questions became fuel. From then on, I decided I would not just survive their neglect. I would outgrow it. Every nod of indifference, every shrug when I brought home excellence, they were bricks I would use to build my own fortress. Looking back, I see now that night was the turning point. Because when you've stood alone at your own victory, when you've tasted the hollow ache of applause without family, something inside you shifts. You stop living for their approval, and you start living for your own definition of worth. And maybe that's why you're here listening to my story. Maybe you've had that moment too when the people you love most chose something else over you, when your triumph was met with silence. Tell me, have you ever stood in that same silence? Have you ever achieved something huge only to find the ones who should cheer for you were absent? Leave a comment and share it because your story deserves to be heard. That was my breaking point. That was when I began to see the truth that my parents would never be the source of validation I craved. The only way forward was to stop waiting for them to give me worth. So I picked up that medal, tucked it into a drawer, and closed it not just on the award, but on the hope that they would change. From then on, every decision I made carried a new fire. If I was invisible in their eyes, I would build a life so undeniable that no one could ignore me. And when the day came that they finally looked my way, it would not be because I begged for their attention. It would be because the world was already watching. The summer after high school was the first time I felt the weight of complete independence. I had a partial scholarship to Harvard, enough to cover tuition, but not the endless list of other expenses: housing, books, food, transportation. My parents made vague promises about helping, but I knew better. Their support was always conditional, always tied to Cassandra's needs. I refused to give them the chance to pull that rug out from under me. So I decided I would not ask them for a single dime. That summer became a test of endurance. At dawn, I tied on an apron at the local coffee shop, memorizing complicated drink orders while forcing smiles for rushed commuters. By afternoon, I traded the smell of espresso for the hum of printers and phones as an office assistant filing papers that no one else wanted to touch. When evening came, I sat across from restless high schoolers, tutoring them in math, and writing their parents, handing me envelopes of cash that I counted like lifelines. 3 jobs, 7 days a week. Sleep was a luxury I learned to live without. I can still remember the ache in my feet after 12-hour shifts, the sting of my eyes as I reread notes under flickering lamps, the gnawing question, would it be enough? Every dollar I saved became a brick in the wall I was building between myself and dependence on my parents. By August, I had scraped together just enough. 2 suitcases packed with closed secondhand textbooks, and the fierce determination of someone who knew this was her only chance. When my parents offered to drive me to Cambridge, I shook my head. "I've got it covered," I said. My mother looked almost concerned for a second. "Do you have enough money for the semester?" I nodded firmly, even though my stomach twisted with fear. My father barely looked up from his newspaper. "College is expensive. Don't waste your money on frivolous things." That was his parting wisdom. No hug, no pride, just another reminder that I was on my own. Meanwhile, Cassandra was entering her freshman year of high school with a brand new wardrobe and the latest MacBook Pro. The contrast was stark, almost laughable, but by then, I had stopped expecting fairness. When I wheeled those suitcases out the door, something shifted inside me. Yes, there was sadness walking away from the idea of parents who might care, but there was also liberation. For the first time, I was fully in control. My life, my choices, my survival. Arriving at Harvard was like stepping into another world. Towering buildings, brilliant classmates, professors who spoke in theories and strategies that shaped industries. I wanted to feel awe, but mostly I felt pressure to prove I belonged. Pressure to prove I could survive without safety nets. My first semester nearly broke me. While other students spent afternoons at study groups or coffee shops, I dashed from the library job in the morning to food deliveries between classes, then collapsed into retail shifts on weekends. Some nights I fell asleep at my desk. Textbooks, still open alarms set to wake me before dawn. And yet, every exhausted morning, every paycheck deposited, every small victory carried a secret satisfaction. This was mine. No one could say they gave it to me. Looking back, those months taught me more than any lecture ever could. They taught me grit. They taught me that comfort is not the foundation of success, endurance is. And they taught me that independence, even when it feels like drowning, can also feel like freedom. I realized something crucial then. If I could make it through this, if I could keep going, despite the hunger, the exhaustion, the loneliness, then there was nothing in this world I could not build for myself. It was the first step toward becoming the woman who would one day run a billion-dollar company. But back then, all I knew was this: I had arrived at Harvard by my own power, and I would keep going no matter what it cost me. Harvard is often painted as a dream: towering libraries, centuries of tradition, brilliant students debating over coffee in ivy-covered courtyards. But for me, that dream looked different. It looked like a cramped dorm room with peeling paint and the faint smell of mildew. It looked like instant ramen eaten cold because I was too tired to boil water. It looked like 3 jobs stitched together in a desperate attempt to keep up with the cost of living. While my classmates mapped out internships at prestigious firms, I mapped out work shifts trying to squeeze study hours between deliveries and cashier runs. Some mornings, I woke up in the library where I worked my head, resting on a stack of returned books. Other days, I raced across Cambridge, balancing food orders on my bike, the icy wind cutting my face as I thought of the exams waiting for me that night. I was constantly running towards something bigger, and running away from the gnawing fear that I might not make it. Meanwhile, Cassandra's updates drifted in through family calls. My parents gushed about her new wardrobe, her designer laptop, the fancy parties she attended as a high school freshman. I tried not to compare, but how could I not? She had everything handed to her while I was calculating whether I could afford both rent and textbooks in the same month. It wasn't just the money, it was the silence. When Cassandra got a new car, there were cheers and photos. When I aced another exam, there was barely a nod. I remember one Thanksgiving especially well. The dorms had emptied out. My classmates flew home to families waiting with turkey dinners. I stayed behind taking extra shifts at a restaurant that offered me double pay. That evening, while serving plates of mashed potatoes and cranberry sauce to strangers, I dialed home. I wanted to hear something warm, something that might remind me I wasn't invisible. My mother's voice answered. "We miss you, Harper," she said, distracted. In the background, I heard laughter glasses clinking. Cassandra made the most beautiful centerpiece for the table. I listened silent until she said I should let you go. Call again soon, and then the line went dead. I stood in that restaurant kitchen, phone in hand, surrounded by the smell of roasted turkey that wasn't for me. That was the moment it sank in my achievements, my sacrifices, my survival. None of it would ever be enough for them. But here's the strange thing. That emptiness carved out space for something else, for resilience, for the understanding that if I wanted warmth, I would have to build it myself. Day by day, paycheck by paycheck, I proved to myself that I could stand. And though I often felt alone, I wasn't entirely. There were small sparks friendships beginning to form, professors who noticed my effort. One in particular would change everything soon. Still, those first years hardened me. They taught me how to stretch a dollar until it screamed. They taught me how to survive on 4 hours of sleep and a stubborn will. They taught me that while my sister lived in comfort, I was being forged in fire. And if you're listening right now, maybe you know that fire. Maybe you've had to push through nights of hunger, through holidays spent alone, through the silence of people who should have cheered for you. If you do, hit that subscribe button. Stay with me. Because this isn't just a story of struggle, it's a story of what comes after when all that pain transforms into power. Back then, though, I didn't know any of that. I only knew I was tired. I only knew that every day felt like climbing a mountain barefoot. But I also knew one more thing: I wasn't giving up. Not now, not ever. I was not meant to walk through Harvard alone forever. Somewhere between the exhaustion and the endless hours of work, I met someone who would change how I survived those years. Her name was Jessica Rodriguez. We crossed paths during a late-night study session at the library. She was hunched over a stack of worn textbooks, highlighting passages with the same intensity I felt burning in my own chest. We locked eyes for a second, two strangers who instantly recognized something familiar. Later, Over lukewarm coffee, she told me her story. She came from Arizona, raised by a single mother, and she was working just as many jobs as I was to stay afloat. That night it felt like I had finally found a mirror. Jessica and I quickly became each other's lifelines. We shared everything: secondhand textbooks, leftover meals, notes scribbled in the margins of used paper. Some nights we cooked spaghetti in the communal kitchen, stretching one meal into three by adding cheap canned beans. Other nights we split the cost of a pizza and laughed at how extravagant it felt. But it wasn't just the food or the books, it was the understanding. She never asked me why my parents weren't helping. She just looked at me with quiet anger one night and said, "That's not independence, Harper. That's neglect." Hearing it out loud from someone else, it hit me harder than anything my parents had ever said. For the first time, I realized I wasn't imagining the unfairness. It was real. Jessica became the family I didn't have. She was there when my grades slipped from exhaustion, when my bike broke down and I couldn't afford repairs, when heartbreak came knocking. She sat with me through nights when I felt like quitting, her voice steady. "You've come too far to stop now." We also dreamed together. Late nights sitting on the library steps, we whispered about the future. She wanted to build something that mattered, something that gave back to the world. I didn't know exactly what my future held then, but talking with her made me believe I could carve one out on my own terms. Still, the weight of survival never disappeared. There were times when I worked shifts back to back and stumbled into our dorm, barely able to keep my eyes open. Jessica would leave food on my desk or cover part of a bill when I couldn't. I did the same for her. We weren't keeping score. That's what family does, they carry each other when the weight gets too heavy. One night we sat on the floor, surrounded by crumpled notes and empty takeout boxes. Jessica looked at me and asked, "How can your parents not help at all, especially when they clearly have the money?" I shrugged, trying to look unfazed. "They say it's about teaching me self-sufficiency." She shook her head. "No. That's abandonment dressed up as virtue." Her words stayed with me. They stripped away the excuses I had been feeding myself for years. I wasn't being taught responsibility. I was being left behind. And yet, even in that abandonment, something powerful was happening. I was learning who I could rely on. I was building a chosen family, one that wasn't tied by blood, but by loyalty, respect, and mutual struggle. Looking back now, I realized Jessica was more than a friend. She was proof that I wasn't invisible. Proof that even in the hardest, loneliest seasons, someone could see me, believe in me, and stand beside me. And if you're hearing this, maybe you found your Jessica, or maybe you're still searching. Either way, don't give up. The people who are meant to be in your corner will find you. They will fight with you. And if you're ready to be part of a community that understands, drop a comment below and share your story. Because this isn't just mine, it could be yours too. At the time, though, I didn't know what was coming. I didn't know that beyond Jessica's friendship, another figure would appear, one who would not just support me, but ignite a vision I never imagined for myself. There is always that one person who enters your life at the exact moment you are ready for change. For me, that person was Professor Wilson. I met her during my junior year when I nervously enrolled in her financial technology course. Most professors at Harvard barely noticed me, just another quiet, exhausted student sitting in the back row. But she did. She saw me. One day after I turned in a paper analyzing digital payment systems, she stopped me as the class emptied out. I remember her voice, sharp but kind. "This is graduate-level work, Hannah. Where did you learn to think like this?" No one had ever said that to me before. Not my parents, not my teachers, not even myself. I stood frozen, clutching my backpack, unsure how to respond. She smiled and gestured toward the paper. "Have you considered focusing on this field? You have a gift." That single moment cracked something open inside me. All the nights I had doubted myself, all the times my parents dismissed my achievements, it was as if her words pushed back against every one of them. From then on, she became more than just a professor. She became a mentor, the adult figure I had been longing for all my life. She recommended books, introduced me to industry contacts, and most importantly, believed in me without asking for proof. When she looked at me, she didn't see the neglected daughter. She saw potential. Her encouragement lit a fire I didn't know I had. I spent hours in the library researching cryptocurrency and blockchain, a world that was still mysterious in those days. I wasn't just studying for grades anymore. I was chasing a vision. It was 2019 and Bitcoin had just recovered from a massive crash. Everyone dismissed it as a fad, but I saw something else. With every article I read and every line of code I practiced, the idea grew clearer. There had to be a safer, faster way to make digital transactions work. I remember one night sitting across from Jessica in our dorm, pages of notes spread across the floor. My hands shook with excitement as I explained my theory. If we can build a platform that combines bank-level security with faster processing, it could change everything. Jessica laughed, not because she doubted me, but because she saw the spark in my eyes. "I think you found your calling," she said. And she was right. But here's the thing, every vision begins as a whisper. It's fragile, almost laughable. For a long time I kept it to myself, afraid that if I spoke it out loud, it would collapse. Yet, Professor Wilson kept pressing me. "This isn't just an idea, Hannah. This is a gap in the market, and you might be the one to fill it." That was when I started sketching what would become Secure Pay. Looking back now, I see that this was the moment when my life split in two, the old version of me scraping by just to survive, and the new version daring to imagine something greater. And maybe that's what you need to hear tonight. Maybe you're sitting in your own back row convinced no one sees you. But someone will. And when they do, you'll realize you've been ready all along. So let me ask you, has there ever been a mentor, a teacher, a friend who said one sentence that changed everything for you? Share it in the comments, because sometimes one voice is all it takes to rewrite a life. For me, that voice belonged to Professor Wilson. And her belief didn't just change how I saw myself, it set me on a path that would soon collide with challenges and victories I could never have imagined. I had no idea then that this fragile idea would grow into a company worth billions. I only knew this for the first time I wasn't just surviving, I was building. Ideas are fragile things. At first, they live only in notebooks and late-night whispers and sketches no one else believes in. But under the right conditions, they grow. And that was exactly what happened with Secure Pay. The summer before my senior year, I made a decision that most of my classmates thought was reckless. While they packed for internships at top firms or planned luxury trips abroad, I stayed in Cambridge. I rented the cheapest room I could find, a tiny studio where the walls shook whenever the subway rumbled by, and I devoted myself entirely to building my dream. Secure Pay began on a battered laptop fueled by instant noodles and caffeine. I coded for hours, wrestling with lines of logic until my eyes burned. When I wasn't programming, I was drafting business plans, mapping out revenue models, and designing crude prototypes. Jessica, even though she wasn't a tech person, sat with me night after night, proofreading my pitch slides, asking the questions I needed to answer. The Harvard Business School hosted a startup competition every year. The prize was $50,000 in seed funding and a workspace inside the Innovation Center. To me, it was more than money. It was validation, the kind I had never gotten from home. I worked obsessively, rehearsing my pitch in front of Jessica 20 times until she begged me to sleep. Pacing the floor, rewriting slides at 3 a.m. Every failure, every doubt became fuel. When the day of the competition came, I walked into that auditorium shaking. Over 100 teams were there, many backed by students with connections with parents and venture capital, with years of resources I could only dream of. And then there was me, a girl who had built her prototype in a shoebox apartment. I stood on stage, adjusted the microphone, and began. What if digital transactions could be faster than a credit card swipe and safer than a bank vault? I walked them through the flaws in current systems, the loopholes hackers exploited, the reasons everyday people distrusted cryptocurrency. Then I unveiled Secure Pay, my solution. The questions came hard and fast. What about scalability? What about adoption? What makes you different? My heart pounded, but I answered each one with the same fire that had kept me alive all those years. By the time I finished, the room was quiet. Judges scribbled notes, investors exchanged glances. Hours later, they announced the winner. Secure Pay, founded by Hannah Carter. For a moment, I couldn't move. Jessica shoved me forward, tears in her eyes. Applause roared in my ears, but all I could think was someone finally believed in me. $50,000, office space, but more than that, a chance. That night, as I sat in the empty workspace, I had just one staring at the keys in my hand. I felt something I had never felt before. Pride, not the fleeting kind, but the deep kind that comes when you know you've carved your own path. And yet I also knew this was just the beginning. Because money runs out, ideas get tested, dreams are fragile until you fight to make them real. But I wasn't afraid anymore. Secure pay wasn't just an idea in my notebook, it was real. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel invisible. I didn't know yet how brutal the road ahead would be, or how close I'd come to losing everything. But that night, holding that check, I made myself a promise I would not stop. Not until secure pay was more than a dream, not until the world knew my name. Success has a way of testing you not just through obstacles, but through temptations. Mine came in the form of a man named Michael Chen, a tech entrepreneur who had built and sold companies long before I had even stepped into Harvard. After secure pay won the competition, news traveled quickly. Investors wanted meetings, emails filled my inbox. But Michael's message stood out. He invited me to lunch in Boston, a quiet corner table where he leaned forward and said, "Let's cut to the chase. I'll give you $2 million for the entire concept right now. You can finish your degree without stress, and I'll take it from here." $2 million. I froze, my fork suspended in midair. Do you know what $2 million meant to someone like me? It meant freedom from debt. It meant no more ramen dinners, no more sleepless nights, juggling shifts. It meant security, something my parents had never given me. For a moment, I almost said yes. But then another thought crept in. If I sold now, what would it mean? It would mean handing away the one thing I had built entirely by myself. It would mean letting someone else take the glory, the growth, the story. I looked at him and heard myself say steady and clear, "No. Thank you, but I believe in what I'm building. I want to see it through." Michael raised his brows, surprised. Most students would jump at that offer. "I'm not most students," I replied. He smiled, then not with mockery, but with respect. Good answer. The next day he called again with a different proposal, $500,000 for 15% equity. That was the deal I accepted. It gave me fuel without giving away my future. Still, I couldn't shake the temptation of that first offer. What if I had said yes? Would my life have been easier? Probably, but would it have been mine? No. That's the thing about shortcuts. They promise comfort, but they steal ownership. And I had spent too many years letting other people define me. I wasn't about to hand over my destiny for a quick paycheck. The decision marked a turning point. With the funding, I incorporated secure pay, hired 2 brilliant coders and a marketing grad student, and moved into the tiny office space. We lived off takeout, coded through the night, argued over design, and fixed bugs until dawn. It was chaos, but it was ours. Looking back, that no was one of the most important words I ever said. It proved to me that I wasn't just building a product, I was building myself. And maybe you've been there too. Faced with the easy way out, the quick solution, the deal that looks shiny but robs you of your own power. That's why I want you to stay with me, because what happened after I turned down that $2 million made everything even more intense. This isn't just about success. It's about the storm that followed. Don't go anywhere, because the struggle nearly broke me. The truth, saying no to the easy path meant saying yes to a harder one. And that path would test me in ways money could never solve. Because ahead of us loomed crisis. The first months after launching Secure Pay felt like a dream. We had funding, we had energy, and for the first time, I felt like the pieces of my life were falling into place. But dreams have sharp edges, and I learned quickly that building something real meant bleeding for it. Our small team worked in a cramped office that smelled of cold pizza and burnt coffee. 2 coders hunched over their screens, typing until their fingers cramped. Our marketing grads scribbled campaigns on whiteboards stained with old ink. And me, I was everywhere at once. CEO, developer fundraiser, problem solver. The weight was crushing, but adrenaline kept me moving. Then came the disaster. One evening, just weeks before a critical investor demo, we uncovered a massive flaw in our security protocol. It wasn't a minor bug, it was a hole big enough to sink us. Transactions could be intercepted, data stolen. Everything we had built was suddenly at risk of collapsing. Panic spread like fire. One of our developers slammed his laptop shut and muttered, "We'll never fix this in time." The next morning, he quit. Just like that, we were down to 3. For 4 days, I didn't sleep. I lived on energy drinks, rewriting code line by line, chasing errors like shadows that multiplied every time I thought I'd caught them. Jessica came in after her classes to handle emails, order food, and remind me to drink water. Sometimes she sat beside me quietly, just so I wouldn't feel alone. I remember staring at my reflection in the office window at dawn, eyes bloodshot skin, pale hands trembling, and whispering to myself, "You can't quit. Not now. Not after everything." By the end of the week, we had patched the system. The demo went ahead shaky but functional. The investors didn't see the exhaustion behind our smiles. They saw progress, and somehow that was enough to buy us time. But the cracks kept coming. Our bank account was draining faster than we could fill it. Bills stacked on my desk. Every pitch felt like gambling with our future. Some nights I walked home through the empty streets of Cambridge, wondering if I had made a colossal mistake. It all came to a head one night when I called Professor Wilson. My voice cracked as I admitted, "I think I've ruined everything. We're going to run out of money before we even launch." Her reply was simple, steady. "Every successful entrepreneur has nights like this, Hannah. The difference is whether you push through or give up. Which one are you going to be?" Her words hit me like a lifeline. I chose. I pushed. I doubled down writing more code myself, reaching out to contacts for help pulling Jessica deeper into the team, even though she wasn't technical. We hustled, we fought, and somehow we survived. Looking back, that storm nearly destroyed me. But it also revealed something vital. Pressure doesn't just test you, it transforms you. And maybe you felt that too. Maybe you've stood on the edge of failure, staring into the void, wondering if the dream was worth the pain. If you have, tell me in the comments how you pushed through. Because your story matters, and someone else might need to hear it. For us, that crisis didn't end the dream, it forged it. Secure Pay crawled out of the fire, scarred but alive. And in the months that followed, the breakthrough came the moment that would change everything and launch us into a new world. But at that time, I only knew this: I had chosen not to give up. And that choice made all the difference. When you crawl out of fire and realize you're still standing, the world looks different. After those brutal months of near-collapse, Secure Pay finally found its breakthrough. Our new proprietary algorithm processed transactions 30% faster than any existing crypto platform while keeping bank-level security. It was the edge we desperately needed. Michael, our early investor, nearly jumped out of his seat when we showed him. "This changes everything," he said. And he was right. Soon doors began to open. Venture capital firms that had once brushed off my emails were suddenly eager for meetings. Our timing couldn't have been better. Cryptocurrency was experiencing a resurgence, and everyone wanted to be part of the next big leap. The pitching frenzy began. New York, Boston, endless boardrooms filled with polished investors in tailored suits. I stood at the head of glossy tables explaining why Secure Pay wasn't just another crypto startup, but the future of secure digital finance. I wore the same black blazer to every meeting, patched inside, where the lining had torn. But I spoke with a conviction no one could ignore. And then it happened. After a whirlwind of negotiations, we closed a funding round of $50 million. The valuation, $700 million. A number that once felt impossible now defined my reality. I remember sitting in the tiny office with Jessica and the rest of our small team staring at the email that confirmed it. My hands shook as I whispered, "We did it." The room erupted. We laughed, cried, hugged, because for the first time, survival wasn't our only goal. Growth was. By graduation season, Secure Pay had expanded to 30 employees. Developers, marketers, legal advisors, people who believed in the vision, who believed in me. The valuation climbed past $1 billion, a unicorn, and me. On paper, a billionaire at 22. The irony wasn't lost on me. My parents had told me to take a bus to Harvard to handle everything alone. And now, while my sister drove a Bentley in Los Angeles, I owned a company that reshaped the financial future. But here's the truth I told no one in my family. Not yet. Part of me wanted to see their faces when they finally discovered. Another part, maybe the stronger part, was afraid that even this wouldn't be enough to win their love. So I stayed quiet. Professors congratulated me, classmates whispered, and Professor Wilson reminded me to stand tall. Yet at night, in the silence of my apartment, I still felt the ache. I wanted my family to be proud of me, not because of the billions, but simply because I was graduating. That's the paradox of success. You can build empires, change industries, and still crave the simple nod from the people who should have been cheering all along. But I had learned one thing: the applause I needed most had to come from within. And maybe you felt that too, that longing for recognition from someone who never gave it. If you know that ache, if you've ever wished your parents, or someone close, would just say, "I'm proud of you, hit that subscribe button and stay here." Because in this story, the applause that finally came wasn't theirs, it was the world's. By the time the cap and gown hung in my closet, I was balancing two identities: student and CEO, graduate and billionaire. And soon those two worlds would collide in the most public way imaginable on the very stage my parents refused to drive to. The truth was about to come out, and when it did, nothing would ever be the same. Graduation season was supposed to feel like triumph, the reward at the end of years of sacrifice. For me, it came wrapped in another bitter reminder of where I stood in my family. 3 weeks before the ceremony, I mailed formal invitations to my parents and my sister Cassandra. I wrote a note in my own handwriting asking them to come, telling them it would mean the world to have them there. I sealed the envelopes with a strange mix of hope and dread, praying this time would be different. Days passed, no reply. Then one Tuesday evening, as I left the Secure Pay office, my phone lit up with my father's name. My stomach clenched before I even answered. "Hannah," he said in his brisk, businesslike tone, "we received your invitation." I waited, gripping the phone, heart racing, expecting at least a flicker of excitement. Instead, he continued, "We have a conflict that weekend, Cassandra's high school graduation. There are several celebration activities planned. The timing won't work." I felt my throat tighten. "Her ceremony is Thursday. Mine is Saturday. You could attend both." He paused, then delivered the blow. "We're taking her on a shopping trip to New York that weekend as part of her graduation gift. The plans have been set for months." Silence stretched between us. "This is my Harvard graduation," I said quietly. "It's kind of a big deal." "We're proud of you," he replied, softening just enough to twist the knife. "You've always been self-sufficient. I'm sure you'll handle this on your own too." And then the line that would stay carved into my memory forever: "You'll have to take the bus. We're buying Cassandra a Bentley." I nearly dropped the phone. A Bentley, for graduating high school. Meanwhile, I had clawed my way through Harvard with 3 jobs, no support, building a billion-dollar company in silence, and they couldn't drive 2 hours to watch me walk across a stage. When I hung up, I stood on the sidewalk outside the office, the city moving around me in blurs. Jessica found me minutes later, her hand on my shoulder. I told her what happened, my voice hollow. She looked at me with fire in her eyes. "They don't deserve to be there anyway," she said. "Your real family will be cheering for you, me, Professor Wilson, your team. We'll be louder than anyone." That night, Professor Wilson called, and when I told her, she didn't sugarcoat. "Some people can't celebrate your success because it reminds them of their own failures. Don't let their absence dim your light." I wanted to believe her, but the sting was sharp. I imagined myself stepping off that bus in my cap and gown, surrounded by classmates taking pictures with parents who beamed with pride. I would stand alone, again. So I made a decision. I would do exactly what my father suggested. I would take the bus. I would arrive quietly, walk across that stage, collect my diploma, and then return to my office as the CEO of a billion-dollar company. Cassandra could have her Bentley. I had built something far greater. But fate had other plans. 2 days before graduation, the dean of Harvard Business School summoned me. My heart raced. Had something gone wrong with my degree? Instead, he smiled warmly. "Miss Carter Forbes has named you to their 30 under 30 list, featuring you as the youngest self-made female billionaire in tech. With your permission, we'd like to recognize this during the ceremony." I sat in silence, stunned. The secret I had guarded was about to be made public. I thought of my parents still planning their shopping trip. I thought of the look on their faces when the truth dropped. And then, as if on cue, my phone buzzed. A message from my mother. "We've decided we can come to your graduation after all. See you Saturday." I stared at the words, a mix of anger and clarity rising inside me. They hadn't suddenly realized the importance of my day. They had discovered my success. And that revelation would set the stage for the moment I had unknowingly been waiting for all my life. Graduation morning dawned clear and golden, the kind of May day that made Harvard Yard look like a painting. Crimson banners hung from brick walls, rows of white chairs stretched across the lawn, and families gathered in clusters snapping photos. I stood in front of my mirror adjusting my cap and gown, steadying my breath. Despite my parents' last-minute change of heart, I kept my original plan. I boarded the city bus. The ride was strangely peaceful. I stared out the window as Cambridge rolled by, thinking about the girl I had been 4 years earlier, arriving with 2 suitcases, too scared to hope, too stubborn to quit. That girl would never have imagined this moment. When I arrived on campus, Jessica texted that she and Professor Wilson had saved seats near the front. As I walked across Harvard Yard, my eyes scanned the crowd, and there they were, my parents and Cassandra, standing stiffly near the registration table. My father, in his dark suit, my mother polished in pale blue, Cassandra, scrolling on her phone, looking bored. They hadn't noticed me yet. For a second, I studied them from afar, realizing how different I felt now. They looked the same, but I had changed. "Harper." My mother's voice broke when she finally spotted me. She pulled me into a quick hug that smelled of expensive perfume. My father extended a formal handshake instead of an embrace. Cassandra muttered, "Congrats, sis," still half absorbed in her screen. I smiled politely. "I'm glad you came." Soon graduates lined up for the processional. We marched into the swell of pomp and circumstance, the sun warm on our robes. My heart pounded as names were called, diplomas handed out, and then my turn. "Harper Carter." The dean's voice rang out, graduating summa cum laude with highest distinction in business administration. Applause rippled as I crossed the stage, shook his hand, and accepted my diploma. I thought that would be it. But the dean held on to the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," he continued, "it is my extraordinary privilege to share that Miss Carter is not only our valedictorian, but has recently been recognized by Forbes magazine as the youngest self-made female billionaire in the technology sector, founder of Secure Pay." The words echoed across the yard. For a moment, silence, then gasps, then thunderous applause. I risked a glance toward the third row. My father had dropped his program pages, scattering around his polished shoes. My mother's hand covered her mouth in shock. Cassandra stared, wide-eyed, phone forgotten. For the first time in my life, they were stunned into silence by me. I stepped to the podium to deliver my speech. My hands trembled slightly, but not from fear, from power, from release. I spoke about perseverance, about the importance of self-belief when no one else gives it to you. I never mentioned my parents never needed to. The message was clear enough. I had risen in spite of everything. As my words closed, the audience rose to their feet. Applause rained down, and in that thunder I felt something break free inside me. I no longer needed my parents' recognition. I had earned the world's. And yet I knew the real confrontation was coming after the ceremony, when they would face me not as the self-sufficient child, but as a billionaire their neglect had unknowingly forged. But in that moment, standing under the sun with a diploma in one hand and my future in the other, I let myself savor the victory. 'Cause for once I wasn't the invisible child. I was the story. And if you've ever longed for that moment where the people who doubted you have no choice but to watch you rise, then join this community. Hit that subscribe button. Because together, we're proving that the overlooked can outshine everyone. The ceremony ended with caps flying into the sky. Around me, classmates cheered, families embraced. And from across the crowd, I saw my parents pushing toward me, faces tight with urgency. The applause was still ringing in my ears as I realized the real drama was about to begin. When the ceremony ended, Harvard Yard became a sea of laughter, embraces, and flashing cameras. Professors shook hands, alumni donors congratulated me, and classmates crowded around with wide eyes asking about Secure Pay as if they had just discovered a hidden celebrity in their midst. In that joyful chaos, I saw them, my parents and Cassandra, pushing through the throng toward me. My father reached me first, his arms opening for an embrace I barely recognized. "Harper," he boomed loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. "Why didn't you tell us about your company, a billion-dollar valuation? Extraordinary." His hug felt stiff, performative. A gesture meant for the crowd as much as for me, or I pulled back, meeting his eyes. It never seemed relevant to our conversations, I said evenly. "You were always focused on Cassandra's accomplishments." My mother stepped forward, her social smile fixed. "Darling, we're so proud. A billionaire at 22. You must tell us everything." Her tone was syrupy, but her eyes flicked across the watching audience, calculating the social capital of this moment. And then Cassandra spoke. For once, her voice wasn't laced with entitlement. "Is it true you're really a billionaire?" She asked it not with jealousy, but with a kind of awe I had never heard from her before. "Yes," I told her simply. "On paper, the company is worth over $1 billion, and I still own the majority." Her eyes widened. "That's amazing. I always knew you were smart, but this is next level." And for the first time, her admiration felt real, untainted by comparison. I found myself smiling at her, a genuine smile that surprised me. But my father wasn't ready to lose control. He cleared his throat. "We should celebrate this momentous occasion. I've made reservations at La Marraine, just the four of us, a proper family dinner." The word family tasted sour on my tongue. I shook my head. "I already have plans. My team is hosting a celebration tonight." My mother's expression tightened. "Surely you can reschedule. Family comes first." The irony nearly made me laugh. Family had never come first, not when I was valedictorian, not when I begged for support, not when they told me to take the bus. I straightened my shoulders. These people are not just my employees. They're the ones who supported me, who believed in me. I won't push them aside for dinner. My father's jaw hardened. "You're being unreasonable. We came all this way to celebrate you." "No," I said, my voice calm but unshakable. "You came because you found out about the company. Let's not pretend otherwise." For the first time, Cassandra broke the silence. "Actually," she said, glancing at me, "I was the one who convinced them to come. I saw an article about you last week and showed them. They didn't believe it until they checked your website." The truth clicked into place. They hadn't come because they cared about my graduation. They came because my success was now undeniable, valuable to them. I looked at my sister, gratitude softening my anger. "Thank you for telling them, and thank you for being here." But I turned back to my parents, my voice firm. What I wanted today was simple, that my family would be proud of me for graduating. Not for being a billionaire, not for building a company, just for finishing this chapter. But you couldn't even give me that. The words hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. Nearby families pretended not to listen, but their eyes betrayed them. Cassandra shifted closer to me. "Can I come to your party instead? I want to hear more about what you're building." And honestly, I'm tired of being the center of attention all the time. It's exhausting. Her honesty startled me, but it also cracked something open between us. "You're welcome," I told her. "They'd love to meet you." My father's face flushed red. "Cassandra, we had plans." But she shook her head. "I want to be with Harper tonight." It was the first time I had ever seen her push back against them. And in that moment, I realized the roles we'd been forced into me as the overlooked achiever, her, as the indulged favorite, were cages for both of us. For the first time in years, I felt free. 1 year later, I stood in my Manhattan penthouse, floor-to-ceiling windows framing a skyline bathed in gold. The city buzzed beneath me, but inside that quiet space, I felt something I had chased my whole life: peace. On the wall hung a framed Forbes cover, the billion-dollar underdog. How Hannah Carter revolutionized cryptocurrency. SecurePay had exploded beyond anything I once scribbled in notebooks. Our user base passed 5 million. 3 major international banks licensed our technology. The company's valuation soared beyond $5 billion. We had offices in New York, San Francisco, London, over 200 people working toward the vision that had once lived only in my head. But the real transformation wasn't in the numbers, it was in me. The girl who once begged for scraps of approval was gone. In her place stood a woman who knew her worth, who no longer defined herself by the indifference of parents too blinded by favoritism to see her light. And yet the story didn't end with rejection. because something unexpected bloomed out of all that pain healing. Cassandra had come to my graduation party that night, curious and wide-eyed. For the first time, we spoke honestly about what it meant to grow up in the shadow of our parents' expectations. She confessed she never wanted the Bentley. She wanted what I had always wanted: love, without conditions. For years, she felt like a puppet in their story, performing perfection, while quietly admiring the strength she saw in me. 2 weeks later, she called and asked if we could meet. That coffee turned into 4 hours of unfiltered truth. And from there, something new began. She deferred her UCLA enrollment, volunteered in Hawaii, and eventually moved into my penthouse guest suite. She now worked with the Secure Pay Foundation, channeling funds into environmental causes and scholarships for underprivileged students. For the first time, we were sisters, not rivals, not roles, but equals. As for my parents, they tried to reinsert themselves, my father angling for a seat on Secure Pay's board, my mother pitching family-friendly magazine spreads. I drew the line. Boundaries were clear now. Holidays were brief conversations measured. They would never rewrite the past, and I refused to let them control my future. Dr. Lawson, my therapist, once told me, "Forgiveness doesn't mean pretending it didn't happen. It means refusing to let it own you." I carried that with me. I wasn't erasing my scars. I was learning to live with them, to let them remind me of the resilience they forged. And the Secure Pay Foundation became the proof of that resilience. 10% of our profits funded scholarships for students like me, those who had the fire but not the family support. We covered tuition, living expenses, technology, everything I had once scrambled for. Every time I signed off on a new scholarship, it felt like sending a message into the past. You don't have to take the bus alone like I did. One evening, Cassandra came into the living room with a list of new recipients, including a girl from Arizona, she said with a smile, who reminds me so much of you. She's been working 3 jobs just to save for college. I laughed softly. Then make sure she knows she won't have to ride the bus to graduation. We'll send her in style. Cassandra grinned. A Bentley. We both laughed, the soundlight and healing, because that was the true ending. Not the billions, not the accolades, but the freedom to define my own worth, to choose my own family, to build something out of the ashes of neglect. So when I look back at that bus ride, I don't feel bitterness anymore. I feel gratitude. Every disappointment, every dismissal, every lonely holiday, it all pushed me to believe in myself when no one else would. And maybe that's the lesson I leave you with. Your worth is not defined by who overlooks you. It's defined by what you do when you realize you've been overlooked. If this story resonated, join our community, subscribe, share, and stay connected. Because this channel is for those of us who turned pain into purpose. My journey isn't over, but now I walk it not as the girl who longed for approval, but as the woman who found strength in her own reflection. Looking back now, I realize my story was never really about Harvard or Secure Pay or even becoming a billionaire. Those were milestones, yes, but the true journey was something quieter, something harder to measure. It was about learning that worth doesn't come from the people who refuse to see you. It comes from the courage to see yourself. For years I thought if I worked hard enough, sacrificed enough, excelled enough, maybe then my parents would finally notice me. Maybe then I'd be worthy of their pride. But life taught me another truth. Sometimes the people we want love from most are the least capable of giving it. And that's not a reflection of us, it's a limitation of them. I've learned to stop chasing what was never mine to begin with. Instead, I've built my own family, a circle of friends, mentors, teammates, and yes, even a sister who finally found her voice. Together we celebrate each other, not for what we can gain, but for who we truly are. And that more than any number on a balance sheet is freedom. So if you're listening to this and you've ever felt overlooked, forgotten, or left behind, hear me when I say this. Your story isn't defined by the people who couldn't see your light. It's defined by what you do with that light, once you realize it was shining all along. I took the bus to my graduation, but I walked away with something no Bentley could ever buy. Self-belief, independence, purpose. And you can too. Because sometimes the greatest revenge isn't proving them wrong. It's proving yourself right.